First of all, any questions from yesterday on anything? A lot happened in that portion that we did yesterday. Was there anything that was unclear or we want to talk about? Yeah. Yes. And to cross the street apparently is just not a thing in this society because you can't see the cars coming because they're coming so fast that you literally wouldn't have time to cross the street, even, like because you wouldn't see them coming. They could come out of nowhere and run you down. He also thought it was a police car that was coming after him. So it turns out it just grazed him, but it didn't kill him, and it wasn't the police after all. Right? Anything else? Yeah. Oh, yes. Yeah. So, Beatty and Beatty, he thinks it's hard to say for sure if this is just his rationalization for what happened, but he thinks Beatty was suicidal, that he was asking for it, that he didn't try to defend himself or turn things around. Yeah. Go ahead. No, Mildred just left. She turned him in and left. Yeah. Anything else? Did you all pick up on the fact that the beast before it died actually did inject his leg? Right? So he's basically just hobbling on one leg because he got hit with that. I think was it morphine that was in it, right? Pardon me? Did it kill him? It's hard to say what condition his leg's in because adrenaline will do a lot when you're trying to get away. I mean, he has been able to continue to stumble on, but there's definitely something not functioning properly about his leg because of I wouldn't call it a bite, although it was from the mechanical hound that did it. All right, we ready then? Anything else? Okay, we're on page 122, where he says that wasn't the police, he thought. He looked down the boulevard. It was clear now. A car full of children, all ages, God knew, from 12 to 16, out whistling, yelling, hurrahing, had seen a man, a very extraordinary sight, a man strolling, a rarity, and simply said, "Let's get him." Not knowing he was the fugitive Mr. Montague, simply a number of children out for a long night of roaring 500 or 600 miles in a few moonlit hours, their faces icy with wind, and coming home or not coming at dawn, alive or not alive, that made the adventure. They would have killed me, thought Montague, swaying, the air still torn and stirring about him in dust, touching his bruised cheek. For no reason at all in the world, they would have killed me. He walked toward the far curb, telling each foot to go and keep going. Somehow he had picked up the spilled books. He didn't remember bending or touching them. He kept moving them from hand to hand, as if they were a poker hand he could not figure. I wonder if they were the ones who killed Clarice. He stopped, and his mind said it again very loud. I wonder if they were the ones who killed Clarice. He wanted to run after them, yelling. His eyes watered. The thing that had saved him was falling flat. The driver of that car, seeing Montague down, instinctively considered the probability that running over a body at such a high speed might turn the car upside down and spill them out. If Montague had remained an upright target, Montague gasped. Far down the boulevard, 4 blocks away, the beetle had slowed, spun about on 2 wheels, and was now racing back, slanting over on the wrong side of the street, picking up speed. But Montague was gone, hidden in the safety of the dark alley for which he had set out on a long journey, an hour, or was it a minute ago? He stood shivering in the night, looking back out at the beetle as the beetle ran by and skidded back to the center of the avenue, whirling laughter in the air all about it, gone. Further on, as Montague moved in darkness, he could see the helicopters falling, like the first flakes of snow in the long winter to come. The house was silent. Montague approached from the rear, creeping through a thick, night-moistened scent of daffodils and roses and wet grass. He touched the screen door and back, found it open, slipped in, moved across the porch, listening. Mrs. Black, are you asleep in there? He thought. This isn't good, but your husband did it to others and never asked and never wondered and never worried. And now, since you're a fireman's wife, it's your house and your turn for all the houses your husband burned and the people he hurt without thinking. The house did not reply. He hid the books in the kitchen and moved from the house again to the alley and looked back, and the house was still dark and quiet, sleeping. On his way across town, with the helicopters fluttering like torn bits of paper in the sky, he phoned the alarm at a lonely phone booth outside a store that was closed for the night. Then he stood in the cold night air waiting, and at a distance, he heard the fire sirens start up and run and the salamanders coming to burn Mr. Black's house while he was away at work, to make his wife stand shivering in the morning air while the roof let go and dropped in upon the fire. But now she was still asleep. Good night, Mrs. Black, he thought. Faber! Another rap, a whisper, and a long waiting. Then, after a minute, a small light flickered inside Faber's small house. After another pause, the back door opened. They stood looking at each other in the half light, Faber and Montague, as if each did not believe in the other's existence. Then Faber moved and put out his hand and grabbed Montague and moved him in and sat him down and went back and stood in the door listening. The sirens were wailing off in the morning distance. He came in and shut the door. Montague said, I've been a fool all down the line. I can't stay long. I'm on my way God knows where. At least you were a fool about the right things, said Faber. I thought you were dead. The audio capsule I gave you. Burnt. I heard the captain talking to you and suddenly there was nothing. I almost came out looking for you. The captain's dead. He found the audio capsule. He heard your voice. He was going to trace it. I killed him with a flamethrower. Faber sat down and did not speak for a time. My God, how did this happen? Said Montague. It was only the other night. Everything was fine. And the next thing I know, I'm drowning. How many times can a man go down and still be alive? I can't breathe. There's Beatty dead, and he was my friend once. And there's Millie gone. I thought she was my wife, but now I don't know. And the house all burnt, and my job gone, and myself on the run. And I planted a book in the fireman's house on the way. Good Christ, the things I've done in a single week. You did what you had to. It was coming on for a long time. Yes, I believe that. If there's nothing else I believe, it saved itself up to happen. I could feel it for a long time. I was saving something up. I went around doing one thing and feeling another. God, it was all there. It's a wonder it didn't show on me like fat. And now here I am messing up your life too. They might follow me here. I feel alive for the first time in years, said Faber. I feel I'm doing what I should have done a lifetime ago. For a little while, I'm not afraid. Maybe it's because I'm doing the right thing at last. Maybe it's because I've done a rash thing and I don't want to look the coward to you. I suppose I'll have to do even more violent things, exposing myself so I won't fall down on the job and turn scared again. What are your plans? To keep running. You know the war's on. I heard. God, isn't it funny, said the old man. It seems so remote because we have our own troubles. I haven't had time to think. Montague drew out $100. I want this to stay with you. Use it any way that'll help when I'm gone. But I might be dead by noon. Use this. Faber nodded. You'd better head for the river if you can. Follow along it, and if you can hit the old railroad lines going out into the country, follow them. Even though practically everything's airborne these days, and most of the tracks are abandoned, the rails are still there, rusting. I've heard there are still hobo camps all across the country here and there. Walking camps, they call them. And if you keep walking far enough and keep an eye peeled, they say there's lots of old Harvard degrees on the tracks between here and Los Angeles. Most of them are wanted and hunted in the cities. They survive, I guess. There aren't many of them, and I guess the government's never considered them a great enough danger to go in and track them down. You might hole up with them for a time and get in touch with me in St. Louis. I'm leaving on the 5 a.m. bus this morning to see a retired printer there. I'm getting out in the open myself at last. This money will be put to good use. Thanks, and God bless you. Do you want to sleep a few minutes? I'd better run. Let's check. He took Montague quickly into the bedroom and lifted a picture frame aside, revealing a television screen the size of a postal card. I always wanted something very small, something I could walk to, something I could blot out with the palm of my hand if necessary, nothing that could shout me down, nothing monstrous big. So, you see, he snapped it on. Montague, the TV set said, and lit up Montag. The name was spelled out by a voice. Guy Montague, still running. Police helicopters are up. A new mechanical hound has been brought from another district. Montague and Faber looked at each other. Mechanical hound never fails. Never since its first use in tracking quarry has this incredible invention made a mistake. Tonight, this network is proud to have the opportunity to follow the hound by camera helicopter as it starts on its way to the target. Faber poured 2 glasses of whiskey. We'll need these. They drank. Nose so sensitive the mechanical hound can remember and identify 10,000 odor indexes on 10,000 men without resetting. Faber trembled the least bit and looked about his house, at the walls, the door, the doorknob, and the chair where Montague now sat. Montague saw the look. They both looked quickly about the house, and Montague felt his nostrils dilate, and he knew that he was trying to track himself, and his nose was suddenly good enough to sense the path he had made in the air of the room, and the sweat of his hand hung on the doorknob, invisible but as numerous as the jewels of a small chandelier. He was everywhere, in and on and about everything. He was a luminous cloud, a ghost that made breathing once more impossible. He saw Faber stop up his own breath for fear of drawing that ghost into his own body, perhaps being contaminated with the phantom exhalations and odors of a running man. The mechanical hound is now landing by helicopter at the site of the burning. And there on the small screen was the burnt house, and the crowd and something with a sheet over it, and out of the sky, fluttering, came the helicopter like a grotesque flower. So they must have their game out, thought Montague. The circus must go on, even with war beginning within the hour. He watched the scene, fascinated, not wanting to move. It seemed so remote and no part of him. It was a play apart and separate, wondrous to watch, not without its strange pleasure. That's all for me, you thought. That's all taking place just for me, by God. If he wished, he could linger here in comfort and follow the entire hunt on through its swift phases, down alleys, across streets, over empty running avenues, crossing lots and playgrounds, with pauses here or there for the necessary commercials, up other alleys to the burning house of Mr. and Mrs. Black, and so finally to this house with Faber and himself seated, drinking while the electric hound snuffed down the last trail, silent as a drift of death itself, skidding to a halt outside that window there. Then, if he wished, Montague might rise, walk to the window, keep one eye on the TV screen, open the window, lean out, look back, and see himself dramatized, described, made over, standing there, limned in the bright small television screen from outside, a drama to be watched objectively, knowing that in other parlors he was large as life, in full color, dimensionally perfect, and if he kept his eye peeled quickly, he would see himself, an instant before oblivion, being punctured for the benefit of how many civilian parlor sitters who had been awakened from sleep a few minutes ago by the frantic sirening of their living room walls to come watch the big game, the hunt, the one-man carnival. Would he have time for a speech? As the hound seized him in view of 10 or 20 or 30 million people, mightn't he sum up his entire life in the last week in one single phrase or a word that would stay with them long after the hound had turned, clenching him in its metal plier jaws, and trotted off in the darkness, while the camera remained stationary, watching the creature dwindle in the distance, a splendid fade-out? What could he say in a single word, a few words, that would sear all their faces and wake them up? There, whispered Faber. Out of a helicopter glided something that was not machine, not animal, not dead, not alive, glowing with a pale green luminosity. It stood near the smoking ruins of Montague's house, and the men brought his discarded flamethrower to it and put it down under the muzzle of the hound. There was a whirring, clicking, humming. Montague shook his head and got up and drank the rest of his drink. It's time. I'm sorry about this. About what? Me? My house? I deserve everything. Run, for God's sakes. Perhaps I can delay them here. Wait, there's no use you being discovered. When I leave, burn the spread of this bed that I touched. Burn the chair in the living room in your wall incinerator. Wipe down the furniture with alcohol. Wipe the doorknobs. Burn the throw rug in the parlor. Turn the air conditioning on full in all the rooms and spray with moth spray if you have it. Then turn on your lawn sprinklers as high as they'll go and hose off the sidewalks. With any luck at all, we can kill the trail in here anyway. Faber shook his head. I'll tend to it. Good luck. If we're both in good health, next week, the week after, get in touch. General delivery, St. Louis. I'm sorry there's no way I can go with you this time by earphone. That was good for both of us, but my equipment was limited. You see, I never thought I would use it. What a silly old man. No thought there. Stupid, stupid. So I haven't another green bullet, the right kind to put in your head. Go now. One last thing. Quick. A suitcase. Get it. Fill it with your dirtiest clothes, an old suit, the dirtier the better, a shirt, some old sneakers and socks. Faber was gone and back in a minute. They sealed the cardboard valise with clear tape, to keep the ancient odor of Mr. Faber in, of course, said Faber, sweating at the job. Montague doused the exterior of the valise with whiskey. I don't want the hounds picking up two odors at once. May I take this whiskey? I'll need it later. Christ, I hope this works. They shook hands again and, going out the door, glanced at the TV. The hound was on its way, following by hovering helicopter cameras, silently sniffing the great night wind. It was running down the first alley. Goodbye. And Montague was out the back door slightly, running with the half-empty valise. Behind him, he heard the lawn sprinkling system jump up, filling the dark air with rain that fell gently, and then with a steady pour all about, washing on the sidewalks and draining into the alley. He carried a few drops of this rain with him on his face. He thought he heard the old man call goodbye, but he wasn't certain. He ran very fast away from the house, down toward the river. Montague ran. He could feel the hound, like autumn, come cold and dry and swift, like a wind that didn't stir grass, that didn't jar windows or disturb leaf shadows on the white sidewalks as it passed. The hound did not touch the world. It carried its silence with it, so you could feel the silence building up a pressure behind you all across town. Montague felt the pressure rising and ran. He stopped for breath on his way to the river to peer through dimly lit windows of vacant houses and saw the silhouettes of people inside watching their parlor walls, and there on the walls the mechanical hound, a breath of neon vapor, spidered along, here and gone, now at Elm Terrace, Lincoln, Oak Park, and up the alley toward Faber's house. Go past, thought Montague. Don't stop. Go on. Don't turn in. On the parlor wall, Faber's house, with its sprinkler system pulsing in the night air. The hound paused, quivering. No, Montague held to the windowsill. This way, here. The procaine needle flicked out and in, out and in. A single clear drop of the stuff of dreams fell from the needle as it vanished in the hound's muzzle. Montague held his breath, like a doubled fist in his chest. The mechanical hound turned and plunged away from Faber's house, down the alley again. Montague snapped his gaze to the sky. The helicopters were closer, a great blowing of insects to a single light force. With an effort, Montague reminded himself again that this was no fictional episode to be watched on its run to the river. It was in actuality his own chess game he was witnessing, move by move. He shouted to give himself the necessary push away from this last house window and the fascinated seance going on in there. Hell, and he was away and gone. The alley, a street, the alley, a street, and the smell of the river. Leg out, leg down, leg out, leg down. 20 million Montagues running soon if the cameras caught him. 20 million Montagues running like an ancient flickery Keystone comedy. Cops, robbers, chasers in the chased, hunters and hunted. He had seen it 1,000 times. Behind him now 20 million silently baying hounds ricocheted across parlors, three cushion shooting from right wall to center wall to left wall, gone right wall, center wall, left wall, gone. Montague jammed his seashell to his ear. Police suggest entire population in the Elm Terrace area do as follows. Everyone in every house, in every street, open a front or rear door or look from the windows. The fugitive cannot escape if everyone in the next minute looks from his house. Ready. Of course. Why hadn't they done it before? Why, in all the years, hadn't this game been tried? Everyone up, everyone out. He couldn't be missed. The only man running alone in the night city. The only man proving his legs. At the count of 10. Now, 1, 2. He felt the city rise. 3. He felt the city turn to its thousands of doors. 4. The people sleepwalking in their hallways. 5. He felt their hands on their doorknobs. The smell of the river was cool and like a solid rain. His throat was burnt rust, and his eyes were wept dry with running. He yelled as if this yell would jet him on, fling him the last 100 yards. 6, 7, 8. The doorknobs turned on 5,000 doors. 9. He ran away from the last row of houses on a slope leading down to a solid moving blackness. 10. The doors opened. He imagined thousands on thousands of faces peering into yards, into alleys, and into the sky, faces hid by curtains, pale night-frightened faces like gray animals peering from electric caves, faces with gray colorless eyes, gray tongues, and gray thoughts looking out through the numb flesh of the face. But he was at the river. He touched it just to be sure it was real. He waded in and stripped in darkness to the skin, splashed his body, arms, legs, and head with raw liquor, drank it and snuffed some up his nose. Then he dressed in Faber's old clothes and shoes. He tossed his own clothing into the river and watched it swept away. Then, holding the suitcase, he walked out in the river until there was no bottom, and he was swept away in the dark. He was 300 yards downstream when the hound reached the river. Overheard the great racketing overhead, the great racketing fans of the helicopters hovered. A storm of light fell upon the river, and Montague dived under the great illumination as if the sun had broken the clouds. He felt the river pull him further on its way into darkness. Then the lights switched back to the land. The helicopters swerved over the city again as if they had picked up another trail. They were gone. The hound was gone. Now there was only the cold river and Montague floating in a sudden peacefulness, away from the city and the lights and the chase, away from everything. He felt as if he had left a stage behind and many actors. He felt as if he had left the great seance and all the murmuring ghosts. He was moving from unreality that was frightening into a reality that was unreal because it was new. The black land slid by and he was going into the country among the hills. For the first time in a dozen years, the stars were coming out above him in great processions of wheeling fire. He saw a great juggernaut of stars form in the sky and threaten to roll over and crush him. He floated on his back when the valise filled and sank. The river was mild and leisurely, going away from the people who ate in the farmhouse itself, until a very young and beautiful woman would sit in an unlit window braiding her hair. It would be hard to see her, but her face would be like the face of the girl so long ago in his past now, so very long ago, the girl who had known the weather and never been burned by the fireflies, the girl who had known what dandelions meant rubbed off on your chin. Then she would be gone from the warm window and appear again upstairs in her moon-whitened room. And then, to the sound of death, the sound of the jets cutting the sky in two black pieces beyond the horizon, he would lie in the loft, hidden and safe, watching those strange new stars over the rim of the earth, fleeing from the soft color of dawn. In the morning, he would not have needed sleep, for all the warm odors and sights of a complete country night. I skipped a page? Oh my gosh. All right. Back it up. All right. He floated on his back. Okay. I thought that seemed a little strange stream of consciousness going on there. Thank you. All right. He floated on his back when the valise filled and sank. The river was mild and leisurely, going away from the people who ate shadows for breakfast. There we go. And steam for lunch and vapors for supper. The river was very real. It held him comfortably and gave him the time at last, the leisure to consider this month, this year, and a lifetime of years. He listened to his heart slow. His thoughts stopped rushing with his blood. He saw the moon low in the sky now, the moon there, and the light of the moon caused by what? By the sun, of course. And what lights the sun? Its own fire. And the sun goes on day after day, burning and burning. The sun and time and burning. The river bobbled him along gently, burning. The sun and every clock on the earth. It all came together and became a single thing in his mind. After a long time of floating on the land and a short time of floating in the river, he knew he must never burn again in his life. The sun burned every day. It burned time. The world rushed in a circle and turned on its axis, and time was busy burning the years and the people anyway, without any help from him. So if he burned things with the firemen and the sun burned time, that meant that everything burned. One of them had to stop burning. The sun wouldn't, certainly, so it looked as if it had to be Montague and the people he had worked with until a few short hours ago. Somewhere, the saving and putting away had to begin again, and someone had to do the saving and keeping one way or another, in books, in records, in people's heads, any way at all, so long as it was safe, free from moths, silverfish, rust, and dry rot, and men with matches. The world was full of burning, all types and sizes. Now the guild of the asbestos weaver must open shop very soon. He felt his heel bump land, touch pebbles and rocks, scrape sand. The river had moved him toward shore. He looked in at the great black creature without eyes or light or without shape, with only a size that went 1,000 miles, without wanting to stop, with its grass hills and forests that were waiting for him. He hesitated to leave the comforting flow of the water. He expected the hound there. Suddenly, the trees might blow under might blow under a great wind of helicopters. But there was only the normal autumn wind high up, going by like another river. Why wasn't the hound running? Why had the search veered inland? Montague listened. Nothing, nothing. Millie, he thought. All this country here, listen to it, nothing and nothing. So much silence. Millie, I wonder how you'd take it. Would you shout, shut up, shut up? Millie, Millie. And he was sad. Millie was not here, and the hound was not here, but the dry smell of hay blowing from some distant field put Montague on the land. He remembered a farm he had visited when he was very young, one of the rare few times he discovered that somewhere behind the seven veils of unreality, beyond the walls of parlors and beyond the tin moat of the city, cows chewed grass and pigs sat in warm ponds at noon, and dogs barked after white sheep on a hill. Now the dry smell of hay, the motion of the waters, made him think of sleeping in fresh hay in a lonely barn, away from the loud highways, behind a quiet farmhouse and under an ancient windmill that whirred like the sound of the passing years overhead. He lay in the high barn loft all night, listening to distant animals and insects and trees, the little motions and stirrings. During the night, he thought, below the loft, he would hear a sound like feet moving, perhaps. He would tense and sit up. The sound would move away. He would lie back and look out the loft window very late in the night and see the lights go out in the farmhouse itself until a very young and beautiful woman would sit in an unlit window braiding her hair. It would be hard to see her, but her face would be like the face of the girl so long ago in his past now, so very long ago, the girl who had known the weather and never been burned by the fireflies, the girl who had known what dandelions meant rubbed off on your chin. Then she would be gone from the warm window and appear again upstairs in her moon-whitened room. And then, to the sound of death, the sound of the jets cutting the sky in two black pieces beyond the horizon, he would lie in the loft, hidden and safe, watching these strange new stars over the rim of the earth, fleeing from the soft color of dawn. In the morning, he would not have needed sleep, for all the warm odors and sights of a complete country night would have rested and slept him while his eyes were wide and his mouth, when he thought to test it, was half a smile. And there, at the bottom of the hayloft stair, waiting for him, would be the incredible thing. He would step carefully down in the pink light of early morning, so fully aware of the world that he would be afraid, and stand over the small miracle, and at last bend to touch it. A cool glass of fresh milk, and a few apples and pears laid at the foot of the steps. This was all he wanted now, some sign that the immense world would accept him and give him the long time he needed to think all the things that must be thought. A glass of milk, an apple, a pear. He stepped from the river. The land rushed at him, a tidal wave. He was crushed by darkness and the look of the country and the million odors on a wind that iced his body. He fell back under the breaking curve of darkness and sound and smell, his eyes roaring. He whirled. The stars poured over his sight like flaming meteors. He wanted to plunge in the river again and let it idle him safely on down somewhere. This dark land rising was like the day in his childhood swimming, when from nowhere the largest wave in the history of remembering slammed him down in salt mud and green darkness, water burning mouth and nose, retching his stomach, screaming, too much water, too much land. Out of the black wall before him, a whisper, a shape. In the shape, two eyes. The night looking at him, the force seeing him, the hound! After all the running and rushing and sweating it out and half drowning come this far, work this hard, and think yourself safe and sigh with relief and come out on the land at last, only to find the hound! Montague gave one last agonized shout as if this were too much for any man. The shape exploded away, the eyes vanished. The leaf piles flew up in a dry shower. Montague was alone in the wilderness. A deer. He smelled the heavy musk like perfume mingled with blood, and the gummed exhalation of the animal's breath, all cardamom and moss and ragweed odor in this huge night, where the trees ran at him, pulled away, ran, pulled away, to the pulse of the heart behind his eyes. There must have been a billion leaves on the land. He waded in them, a dry river smelling of hot cloves and warm dust, and the other smells. There was a smell like a cut potato from all the land, raw and cold and white from having the moon on it most of the night. There was a smell like pickles from a bottle and a smell like parsley on the table at home. There was a faint yellow odor like mustard from a jar. There was a smell like carnations from the yard next door. He put down his hand and felt a weed rise up like a child brushing him. His fingers smelled of licorice. He stood breathing, and the more he breathed the land in, the more he was filled up with all the details of the land. He was not empty. There was more than enough here to fill him. There would always be more than enough. He walked in the shallow of tide of leaves, stumbling, and in the middle of the strangeness of familiarity, his foot hit something that rang dully. He moved his hand on the ground, a yard this way, a yard that. The railroad track. The track that came out of the city and rusted across the land, through forests and woods, deserted now by the river. Here was the path to wherever he was going. Here was the single familiar thing, the magic charm he might need a little while to touch, to feel beneath his feet. As he moved on into the bramble brushes and the lakes of smelling and feeling and touching, among the whispers and the blowing down of leaves, he walked on the track, and he was surprised to learn how certain he suddenly was of a single fact he could not prove. Once, long ago, Clarice had walked here, where he was walking now. We're going to stop there for today. So to answer your question about the other firemen, it was only Baby who was killed. Somebody asked that at the very beginning. So just wanted to clarify that the other firemen watched but weren't killed.